Hello, we are back. This is Christy with ForResting the Soul. And kind of giggly right now. Dad is sitting here with me, and we have been trying to figure out some new fancy podcasting equipment that Dad scored on Facebook Marketplace. And it's either us or the equipment. We're feeling pretty confident after 2 days of troubleshooting that
But it don't work.
that it's the equipment. And so we are here back again with episode 4 with our original setup, but we have just put Dad closer to the microphone. So hopefully his voice sounds a little more clear and articulated than mine. Oh, goodness. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Christy.
So, okay, just to kind of recap from where we were with last episode and where we're going today. And for those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, Dad and I have been utilizing this podcast as a creative way to help him construct and write his book that is titled This Is Not Who I Am, Journey from 3D to 5D by Robert Peterson. And last week we got into talking about the fire and everything that Dad went through at the age of 11 when he found himself trapped in the basement where a house fire initiated. And so he was able to share all of the information, and almost all of it. We realized that he kind of skipped over some of the emotions that were pivotal in his life during that time. And, we'll kind of maybe mention that a little bit later. But then toward the end of the episode last time, we did kind of a call or reaching out for other burn victims who may be looking for support. And I actually found out there is, for those of you who are local to Springfield, Missouri, there is a meeting for burn survivors and family members that are 18 and over. And they do that on the first Thursday of the month at Mercy Hospital. So if you're looking for information about that locally, you can email them at sprgburns or burn support at mercy.net. That information is in the show notes from last episode. And there is also an American Burn Association where you can find a burn clinic and support groups in your area if you are not local to Springfield, Missouri, where we are at. So just wanted to follow up on that and share that information before we get into today's episode, which is titled The Champion of Rubber. And this is where Dad is actually going to get into sharing about his experience working in the Champion Rubber plant in McAlester, Oklahoma. Just to set the stage, he was 22 years old, and that put me at around 1.5, I guess, and he was working his ass off to support the family, the only form of income at that time, and young family, young man. And so we just wanted to kind of get into the things that happened during that time of your life, Dad. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, you betcha.
Awesome. So can you describe what it was like working at the plant? Like, what made that job so physically demanding?
Well, at first, I worked on what's called head-in, and then there's a thing called splicers. The rubber inner tubes, they come down through a tuber, they call it a tuber, and it creates a long tube, and then it's cut, and then it's run over to the splicers, and the splicers cut a piece off, and then it splices it together. All of that's pretty easy, but then you get over into the mold line where I worked, and the mold line, it's 137 degrees. There's 13 molds that are kind of like a clam. They open up, you put a tube inside, and then it closes, and you go to the next one. When you get to the 13th one, you go back around to the first one. And these clams have got heat shields on them, and they've also got a safety line so that if you're inside there and it goes to close, it'll hit that safety and it'll open back up. One time that didn't happen. The clam went down and I felt something on my back, which was the safety line, and I jumped out of the mold real quick and the mold closed.
Oh my gosh.
So it was.
If the mold would have closed, what would that have meant?
It would have just squashed me.
Squished you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It would just squashed me.
Wow.
It was a pretty dangerous place to work. Let's just put it that way. They tried to make it as safe as they could, but there was just too many things going on that were dangerous. The thing that damaged my back was the fact that the mold line, there was 4 different mold lines. There was A, B, C, and D line. And the C line, it had big valve stems, and you had to pull the valve stems out of the mold, and so it was tugging on the lower part of your back. And again, it was 127 degrees, and they would hire 10 people to get one to stay running the mold line. And I just got married, and we had to have a lot of furniture and such, so I needed money. And consequently, seeing how they couldn't hardly get anybody to do the job, I was able to literally get all the overtime I wanted. And you could only work 16 hours a day.
Only?
I would work about 95 hours a week to fill in for the people that weren't working. And whenever I injured my back, it was you're bending over and you're pulling and tugging on these cured inner tubes that are now stuck to the inside of the clam. And when you pull on it, it pulls on the lower part of your back tremendously. And that was why it was so demanding, the heat and the tugging on the lower part of your back.
I bet. That's an awkward position, leaning over and not having a lot of support as you're starting to raise back up. And I mean, you can engage your abs all you want, but that's still doing it over and over and over again. A repetitive motion of any kind is quite taxing on the body, as it puts a continuous amount of stress over one set of muscles or joints over and over and over again. So I can only imagine how that would have affected you.
Yeah, that place was a bitch really to work at. There was about 10 steps. I'll just run through them real quick. They take the rubber and they put it through an extruder, which makes the tube, and the tube is really long, and then it gets cut approximate size of the tube. Then the patch is put on it, and it's put up into a splicer, just like taking a sock with the toe cut off, and bringing it up.
Okay.
And then the splicer splices it, and that splice has got to be iced down, and so it's brought over to the molder. That's what the guy running the mold line is called. And he turns the tube inside out, puts it on the ice, and then the next step is that's got to be taken off the ice after about 5 minutes and stretched around a aluminum tube, and then air is put into it. And the air that's put into it is to make it, that soft rubber, mold pretty close to the hard rubber when it comes out of the clam.
Okay.
So then the guy, he reaches in, he grabs the hot tube, 360 degrees, pulls it out of the mold, throws it on a hook that's running around on a conveyor belt.
God, it sounds like a dangerous place to work.
It's very dangerous. There's the powder that they use is very abrasive.
Were you masked? Were you like protecting?
No, there was no masks.
No respirators like for lung protection.
No, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But it was so abrasive, you had to be careful when you run your fingers underneath something to pick it up. If your palms are up and your nails are down and that powder is on it, and that powder is everywhere, you just grind your nails down to nothing.
God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So with such terrible conditions, what motivated you to stick it out? You know, what was your reason for continuing to work there?
Well, my wife and I, we got married very early in life, and suddenly, let's just say that, and I had a lot of furniture to buy, autos to buy, food to buy.
Life to buy.
Life started getting me down. Yeah.
Gosh, at what point did you realize your back was seriously injured?
Well, that happened. That actually happened when I was working overtime, and I was carrying tubes that needed to be molded over to the molder. And in the process of doing it, it was the great big truck tires. And then you carry about as many as you can carry at a time in one arm, and then you throw it up underneath the shelf there for the molder. Well, I turned, and as I turned, I felt a pop. So I immediately went to a doctor, and the doctor says, well, you need to take it easy and take 5 days off. And I didn't do that. And that was my bad. But my wife, Marilyn, she used to rub my legs down every night with Bengay and stuff like that, because, my God, the sciatic nerve was just being mashed on. And so she would rub me down every night, just about every night, and we didn't realize that was nerve pain.
Right. I was going to say, that's the end of it. That's not the source. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't realize I was cutting the nerves up.
Well, how do you? You're 20 or 22, right? You're 22. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not thinking about your body at that age as this finite.
Hell no.
Right?
I didn't even know what the 3D world was.
Right. Right. Barely. Yeah. The 3D, you kind of knew what the 3D world was. I had no idea that there was this whole other realm of care and being cautious, and the reasons why.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be so hard, and you don't have to suffer so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
Pain teacher,
yes, as Paul Chek.
As Paul Chek would say,
about.
pain teacher.
Yep.
Pain. It was trying to teach me not to continue working,
right.
But I didn't listen to my body.
Right.
And so anyway, make a long story short, after seeing about 3 different doctors, I finally got to the right doctor that put me right in the hospital. He was a neurosurgeon, and he tried weeks of bed rest, and that didn't do any good. So then they did what's called an electromyogram. Now, electromyogram, they ground your wrist, and then they take something that's pointy like a pen with a wire on the end of it. It goes over to the machine, and they jab that pin into your leg and run a voltage up it to see if it moves. If it moves, then there's no damage to the nerve. But if it doesn't move, there's damage to the nerve.
Okay.
So after they got through doing almost every muscle on my right leg and not moving at all, they went over to the left leg, and a few of them on the left leg reacted to the stimuli. And so Dr. Billings is what his name was. He says, we need to do a back surgery. He says, well, I take that back. Actually, they ended up, after that, they did what's called a myelogram, where they put a dye into your back. And that dye shows where your spinal cord is and what it's doing. And my disc between L2 and L3, L1 and S1, it was actually S1, L5 and S1.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, no problem.
You're on top of your job.
I try to be. I am.
And it showed that the disc was ruptured backwards.
Oh.
It wasn't ruptured forwards. Like most times people get a bad disc, it pops out forward. Well, this one popped out backwards because of the type of work that I was doing. And
makes sense.
And since I was twisting, it was cutting that nerve. And I come out of surgery, I couldn't piss.
Oh, gosh.
My right leg, I couldn't move. I mean, I couldn't feel it. It was like it was dead. And they had to catheterize me to get the water out of me because everything was just
numb and not working.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so anyway, it took about a week and a half, I'd say, and the feeling started coming back in my
Thank
right
goodness.
leg. And yeah, it was a blessing. It was a blessing. The thing about that was the nerves were coming back alive, and because the nerves were coming back alive, it felt like fire.
Oh, I bet. That tingling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
I notice a theme here. Fire.
Yeah.
Fiery nerves.
But I was supposed to do plenty of walking, so I went out the front door, and there was snow on the ground, and I didn't notice it, but there was a hole there, and I stepped in that hole, and whatever I did, it jarred my back. When it jarred my back, it ruptured the disc above it.
Oh my God.
So now it gets back to the doctor again, and Billings brought in Dr. Livingston, an osteopath, and back then they didn't do fusions like they do today. They actually chiseled the bone off your hip and used that and tied it between the bones of your vertebrae to get it to heal together and make one solid piece so it doesn't bend. And they did that, and whenever I come out from this anesthetic, Dr. Billings, the neurosurgeon, was standing there, and Dr. Billings put his hands on top of my feet, my toes. He says, raise your toes to you. And I raised my toes, and it was like looking at a ghost, you know. He looked at me, he says, I didn't think you'd ever walk again. And at 22, that scared me.
Yeah.
And that fear become something that lasted in my mind as a major limitation in my life. And I was always thinking, I've got a bad back, I got a bad back, I got a bad back, I got a bad back. And I just kept telling myself that. And myself started listening.
I literally crossed my mind as you were speaking earlier. I wondered if you were going to touch on that. Like, you start to attract because what we think about expands, what we focus on expands.
Absolutely. And anyway, at that time, I got hooked on opioids really bad, really, really bad. The doctors, they just handing opioids out like aspirin. I mean, I'm not kidding. And then after I had my second surgery, and it was all good, I said, okay, no more pills. Well, aren't you going to wean me off these things?
Right.
No, didn't do that. Didn't do that. I was awake literally for 3 days, and my mind was moving so fast. I was staging plays in my mind and creating characters to keep me sane. My wife, bless her heart, she was in the kitchen with her little baby Christy, and she was doing the dishes, and the dishes just barely banged together, and I'd say, stop that, you're driving me crazy. And it was just hell for her. She finally said, I'm going into town. She went into town. I found out later that that's why she went into town, just to get away from me. 3 days like that.
It's total withdrawals.
Total withdrawals.
Yeah.
Stool throwing up, the whole works, But then we ended up getting some money from workman's comp over that, not a whole lot. My dad was working on my brother's car. He had a little Corvair, and my dad got gas on his hands and put his hands on fire, so he couldn't work for a while. So we gave him, I don't know, $500 or something, which is,
Back
40
then.
years ago was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so we started out actually living with my mom and living with my mother-in-law. And back then, a lot of this stuff was really hazy. Because I was real hazy back then.
Yeah, well, and you had to stop working.
Yeah.
Because of the back surgery. How was that for you? Like, you were so committed to providing for the family, and then all of a sudden this happens.
That's really a neat story. I was really, really concerned about getting a job because I had a bad back. You hear what's going on here? Fear. The fear teacher.
Yeah.
And even though I had that fear, I put in for this job. I was putting applications in everywhere. And I put in for this one job, and it was a roofing job. And it was funny. The guy that was in charge, that owned the business, one of the two that owned the business. He says, I'll pick you up. I said, okay. We're gonna go down to Hugo. I said, okay. So he picks me up. I get in the cab, and I could smell reefer. And I didn't say anything. I knew what it was. And so we headed on down the road, and we got, 20, 25 miles out of McAlester. We lived in McAlester, Oklahoma at the time. And we got about 25 miles outside of town. And he looks over me and says, you smoke? I said, nah, my dad smokes. I don't. He said, no, I'm talking about reefer. I said, reefer? I knew what he's talking about. I knew what was going on. I was just fucking with his head. Yeah, his name was John. And so John, I told John, I said, yeah. And he says, get underneath the seat right there. He says, there's a bag. He says, roll us a joint. So here I am.
Oh my God.
Rolling this joint, going down the road with my boss.
Had you ever rolled a joint before?
No.
Oh my God.
No. It was a trip.
That was part of your interview process.
It was.
Did you pass or did you fail?
So we go down to Hugo. Now bear in mind, at that time I wasn't smoking that much. I did a lot of opioids, but I didn't hardly smoke at all. I didn't really like the high off of it. And so we get down to Hugo, and we gotta spray this foam down on the top of this building. It was a school, and the school had a hot tar roof, and what they do is they put hot tar down, and then they sprinkle a bunch of rock on top of it, limestone, and so that you can walk on it, and which leaves some loose stuff, and then we don't want to get that foam on there. It's polyurethane foam. You don't want to get it on there. And so we had this power sweeper, so you can save your back.
Right.
Okay. So this power sweeper, if you have it just right and have it kind of pushed down a little bit, it'll have this broom that is moving backwards against you, and it's to sweep the rocks
away. Mm-hmm.
And problem is, if you lift it too high, well, that brush that's going backwards will just push you backwards. Well, I got too close to the edge of the building. The building was 2 stories, and pushed me right off. I raised it too high. It pushed me right off.
This is the same day you smoked weed before you went?
Yes.
Oh, see, boys and girls at home who are listening, this is why you do not operate heavy machinery.
Until you know how you're being affected.
That's right. Okay, so you get pushed off this building.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And this 500-600 pound machine's coming off behind me. And it's amazing how fast your mind will think, even if you're stoned.
Yeah.
It was, I'm fixing to hit the ground here in just a second. I need to get this machine away from me. It's like, whoa, and all of it happened. And I hit the ground with my feet, my ass right between my feet.
Flat-footed. Big, deep squat. Oh my gosh.
He took me in, had me x-rayed, and make sure my legs weren't broke. And my legs weren't broke, but it did mess up my heels. And I've dealt with that for 40-something years. So that's another pain teacher.
Right.
Anybody that's hearing this, listen to the pain and try and keep it out of your life.
Yeah.
But anyway, we come back to the job, and John takes us back up on the roof there, and he squats down next to an air conditioning unit and rolls a joint.
That's hilarious. Well, what about, so where are you at now? You've got a new job. You like your job. You end up staying there for a while. You're still recovering from back surgery. What were some of your biggest challenges as you're kind of walking through this next phase of trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up with a bad back, right?
Yeah. I got out of the insulation business. It's funny how money comes to you when you don't really expect it but need it. Mm-hmm. And I was working for M&M Insulation Company, and we was spraying this great big, huge building. And I was the one that drove the semi truck without a semi license. I managed the crew and so on and so forth, and I complained about the fact that we was all making the same amount of money, and I got fired. So now I'm looking for the next job, And
do you notice a trend?
Huh?
Do you notice a trend?
Yeah.
Yeah, patterns. Okay.
Yeah, sure do.
Yeah.
And so my brother knew a guy that he used to get stuff from, and he got me a job, and I was working for Sirloin Stockade.
I remember that.
And yeah, and how explicit you want me to get here?
Well, I mean, just kind of for the sake of time, we're probably, you can spend a little bit of time there, but we've got some more things to work through as far as how it all tied back to Champion Rubber, and the back injury itself that landed you in the hospital with back surgery and the recovery process. I think that Sirloin Stockade, gosh, I remember that big cow in the front.
Yeah.
I remember it feeling like it was kind of a wild time.
It was real wild.
Yeah.
The manager used to import in from Ada, Oklahoma, just pure methamphetamine.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's how I kind of got onto that.
I don't think I ever knew that until right now. This moment.
It was really bad. It got so bad that I was buying quarter ounces. And, I mean, that's not a lot. But it was for me. I was married and had a child.
Mm-hmm.
That was stupid. But anyway.
But you're also running. You're also kind of running from a lot of realities in your world.
I was.
You have a lot of fear associated with your back and feeling like you're probably not doing what you actually wanted to do. I mean, gosh, back in the day, you wanted to be a doctor, and now you're managing a Sirloin Stockade doing meth.
Yep. That's pretty wild. I was selling it to make money, and I used to have an old pickup, and I sold the pickup for another quarter, and my brother and I did all of it. And I used to do. I got started on it because I was going to college over at Eastern.
I remember, yeah.
And I was working 44 hours a week, plus driving an hour over to the college, an hour back, plus it wears you down. And that's when I started into the stuff.
You get Superman energy.
Yeah, but
yeah.
When I sold that pickup, I figured I'll just do so much that I don't want to ever do it again. And that happened actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I done some sitting on my toilet, and all of a sudden I didn't know where I was. My brother's sitting there saying, I told my brother, I said, "Where Matt? Where Matt?" He said, "You're on the stool." Where? He says, in your bathroom in your house. I was freaking out. I had done so much, but that was a bad time in my life, and I got away from all of that and went to work for Long John Silver's, and I only worked there for a short period of time, and I was really, really fortunate that I was working there instead of Sirloin Stockade, because they had a very good medical program. And
like health insurance?
Health insurance, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's this one kid, I don't remember his name, but they are all gathering out at the lake, and they's going to have some beer. Well, I closed down the restaurant, and I went out there, and I drank one beer. This is what's really weird. And after I drank that one beer, I asked this one boy if I could take his bike for a ride. He goes, "Yeah, go ahead." So it's nighttime, and I take off up the hill, When I get to the top of the hill, the road makes a 90-degree turn to the left, and apparently a car had done the same thing and dug some ruts down in there, and it got dried up, and so it was locked. It was hard. And at the corner there was gravel, and I didn't want to lay the bike down on the gravel. So what I did was
We're talking about a motorcycle.
Yeah, we're talking about a motorcycle.
Yeah, okay.
So I turned and started to go off into the field so I could shut it down kind of easily without having to get spill on the gravel. And when I did, in one of the ruts that the car made, there was a great big rock, and I hit that rock. When I hit that rock, it turned the handlebars, and the handlebars hit me in the ribs, busted 3 ribs, broke my spleen in half, drove my left shoulder into the ground so much that my front and back of my shirt was stained. Had to have 2 surgeries on my shoulder.
Yeah, and we get into all this in the next episode, don't we?
Do we?
Yeah, we do. 2 Wheels in a 3D World is our chapter 5 of your book. That's a really beautiful tie-in.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah. I mean, and what I'm seeing is, like, yeah, you have some focus. You know, you have some focus. You're going back to school, and you have this place that you're working for that has great medical insurance, and you're having a good time with, you know, the people that you work with, and then now this happens. It's kind of like you get a little bit of ahead, and then you fall back. And you get a little bit ahead, and then you have a setback, and you know, so, like, looking back, would you have done anything differently with the jobs that you worked for, or, you know, or these pain teachers just part of your process?
Well, I would have probably stayed and kept my mouth shut over at M&M Solar King.
And was that the installation place?
That was the installation place.
Okay.
Oddly enough, one of the people on the crew, he was used to unions, working for unions, and this was a government job. So they're supposed to be paying union wages. Now here's where things come unexpectedly. We were needing money right then. Okay, I just sold that truck.
Yeah.
And we were needing money right then. Well, this kid went to the labor bureau, and I ended up getting back pay for all the time that I was there, which amounted to $1,750.
Wow.
So
that was a nice gift from the universe.
That's exactly
reminding
right.
You that you're still being protected and seen.
That is a lesson. That's a good lesson. That's a love lesson.
Yeah.
It's not a pain lesson. It's a love lesson. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Wow. How has all of these experiences impacted you on how, like, you view physical health and well-being today?
Well-being, my physical health, I was always guarded with my back. But most of it was my head. My head was mixed up.
Yep.
I had no direction. I had no vision for life. Man without vision shall perish. And I had no vision, and I was going different directions. And because I was going different directions, I was never going anywhere. I was like a percussionary caterpillar. You could put their favorite food right in the middle of them, and they're following each other. They'll starve to death before they stop following each other. And that's kind of what I was doing. And then learned some lessons in Ada, Oklahoma. I went from Long John's. I went over to Ada, Oklahoma as a manager after the motorcycle wreck, and we ended up. I was working so many hours, I never got to see my little girl, which is you, and so I decided to quit, go to the electrical field because it's moving on, and I got locked in. That's all I could see was making it to the end.
Mm-hmm. So vision. So that's, I mean, really, I think this is a beautiful note to kind of start to wrap up on, is looking back over everything and having kind of more of a bird's eye view. You lacked purpose and vision.
Awareness.
And awareness. Yeah.
Awareness.
Yeah.
You've got to have awareness in this life.
Mm-hmm. And something to keep you motivated.
Absolutely.
So you're not just constantly chasing your tail, having some, set your sights on something,
Absolutely.
Even if it's just, and like Paul Chek talks about, his one love, what's the one love?
Yeah.
That is worth all the pain and suffering and more.
Yeah.
And so I think that makes a really, let's stop there with, inviting those of you, if you've made it this far into our 4th episode, which is the 4th chapter of Dad's book, This Is Not Who I Am, Journey from 3D to 5D. This has been the chapter titled The Champion of Rubber, where Dad has reflected upon his experiences and recovery process from yet again another challenging time in his life. That I'm sure some people can really relate to, is working a very highly physically demanding job and having back pain. So we are, taking all these life experiences that he's had thus far and realizing that, it took him finding that vision and that one love to start working and striving for in order to be motivated enough to sustain change. And so we're going to leave with that and invite all of you listening to maybe consider what that one love is for you. And,
Absolutely.
Reflect on that, maybe journal about it, and then maybe join us for our next episode. We will be talking about what Dad already touched on, which was the motorcycle wreck that he had. I remember bits and pieces of that from the backseat of an old car out in the hospital parking lot. The next chapter will be 2 wheels in a 3D world, so you can wait for that episode or anticipate and look forward to that episode dropping next week. Anything else you want to say, Dad, before we cut out of here?
No.
Okay. If there's anything I think of that might be noteworthy in addition to the show notes, I'll put it in the notes. And otherwise, we just look forward to chatting with you next week. And I hope you have a great day. All right.
All right.
Bye, you guys.
Bye-bye.